Chapter 1. Orders in the Storm. The rain was coming down in sheets, thick and punishing, hammering the metal roofs of the forward operations base like an endless drumline. Every soldier in Camp Echo could feel it. The shifting tide, the heaviness in the air, the creeping sense that things were about to turn for the worse. Staff Sergeant Aiden Burke leaned over the weather-beaten map inside the operations tent, jaw set, arms crossed over his chest. His uniform, soaked from his last patrol, clung to his frame like a second skin. His boots squelched every time he shifted his weight, but he barely noticed. His focus was locked on the lines drawn in red marker. Across from him stood Captain Rivas, the hardened company commander, and next to Rivas was Lieutenant Cohen from Intelligence. The air inside the tent was tense, heavy with the smell of damp gear, sweat, and adrenaline. "We lost contact with Viper Team 18 hours ago," Captain Rivas said grimly. His finger stabbed at a location on the map. Intercepted transmissions confirmed they were ambushed at Grid 49 Bravo along the Dry River Valley. Enemy QRF hit them hard. Aiden swallowed, his throat dry despite the rain. Viper Team, his brothers. Guys he trained with, fought alongside, laughed with after hellish missions. Captured, it was a word that didn't sit well with anyone in their unit. It was the worst fate imaginable, to fall alive into the hands of the enemy. Lieutenant Cohen interjected. "Satellite imagery was scrambled after the strike, some jamming tech we can't ID. Drones are blind over the valley. Air support is grounded for at least another 48 hours due to weather. Exfiltration teams are delayed by floodwaters cutting off the western routes." Aiden stared at the map, his heart sinking. "How far behind the lines?" Rivas exhaled through his nose. 70 kilometers, give or take, and it's thick enemy territory. Supply routes, patrol bases, dismantled bridges, minefields. It's a death trap. The words echoed in the cramped tent. Aiden knew what they really meant. Command wasn't going to send a full rescue squad in those conditions. Air was out, ground forces were cut off, no one was coming, unless someone made the impossible trek. "I'll do it," Aiden said, his voice low but steady. The other men looked up, their expressions sharp, surprised but not entirely shocked. Aiden had earned his reputation. He wasn't the loudest or the most decorated, but he was relentless, methodical, and most importantly, he never left anyone behind. Rivas narrowed his eyes. "You'd be going in blind. Zero comms once you cross the Dry River. No medevac, no backup. You'll be dodging patrols, checkpoints, probably dogs, maybe worse." "I know," Aiden replied, "and I also know those guys are out there, beaten, maybe broken, but alive. They're expecting us to come." A silence fell over the room, broken only by the crackle of the rain against the canvas. Rivas finally spoke, his tone grave but respectful. "You'd have to leave before first light. You'll need to travel light stealth gear, minimal ammo, bare essentials. I'll approve one resupply drop halfway in, at 35 clicks, but no guarantees it'll land clean." Aiden nodded, already calculating. "I'll make it work." Lieutenant Cohen moved to the side table, handing Aiden a thick folder maps, enemy activity reports, terrain profiles. "It's all we've got. You'll have to adjust as you go." Aiden tucked the folder into his assault pack, already mentally rehearsing routes, dangers, backup plans. He would have to be invisible. A ghost moving through hostile territory, hunting for any trace of his captured comrades. The captain approached him, resting a firm hand on Aiden's shoulder. "If anyone can make it, it's you. Just remember, this is voluntary. No judgment if you back out." Aiden met his eyes without hesitation. "Not a chance, sir." Rivas gave a tight nod. "Then you've got your orders." The camp was quieter than usual when Aiden returned to his bunk. He packed quickly, efficiently thermal base layers, combat jacket, recon harness, custom suppressed M4, Glock sidearm, survival knife, emergency flares, 2 smoke grenades, rations, a tactical radio with burst transmission capability, and a waterproofed compass. His total pack weight was trimmed to the essentials he needed to be fast, silent, and deadly. He taped a single photo inside his chest pocket, a snapshot from their last deployment, his whole squad grinning like idiots after a successful raid. Among them were the faces of the men he was going to rescue. By 400, Aiden stood at the edge of the perimeter, rain slashing down in icy sheets. His boots were laced tight, rifle slung across his chest, breath fogging in the cold. Rivas and a few other soldiers watched from the sandbags. 70 clicks, alone. "You sure you're not insane?" one of the privates muttered. Aiden gave a faint grin. Maybe, but we don't leave our own. With a final nod, Aiden turned and slipped into the pre-dawn shadows, every sense alive. His boots barely made a sound as they struck the soaked earth, muscles coiled, mind focused. Each step took him deeper into the unknown. Each step brought him closer to his brothers. 70 kilometers of enemy territory awaited, and Aiden Burke would walk through hell itself alone because no man gets left behind. Chapter 2: Crossing the Line. At first light, the world looked deceptively calm. The rain had eased to a cold drizzle, mist curled around the forest edges, and the wind whispered through the broken remains of once civilian farmlands. But Aiden Burke knew better. Behind the mask of tranquility lay death tripwires, patrols, enemy scouts with shoot-on-sight orders. Aiden kept to the low ground, moving through a shallow ravine south of Camp Echo, hugging tree trunks, stepping only on moss patches or old game trails to minimize his sound. His pace was steady but deliberate. He had 70 kilometers to cover, but the first 10 were the most dangerous. Enemy reconnaissance patrols sometimes drifted too close to the front line, probing for weakness. His boots squelched through mud, but his footfalls were soundless, learned from years of fieldcraft. Every few meters he paused listening. Birds chirped, wind rustled leaves, distant streams babbled. No motors, no human voices. He was safe, for now. By mid-morning, Aiden reached the dry river valley, the symbolic front between friendly territory and hostile lands. The river had once been a thriving waterway, but weeks of artillery strikes upstream had turned it into a maze of half-destroyed banks and stagnant pools. The water level was low enough to cross, but the open space made his silhouette dangerously visible. Aiden crouched behind a collapsed tree, scanning the opposite bank through his scope. At 400 meters, 2 enemy sentries stood guard near a rusted pipeline, AK rifles slung lazily but their eyes sharp. Aiden's orders were clear: avoid engagement at all costs until he located the captured team. He adjusted his route, moving east along the river until he found a narrow bend with thicker vegetation. He slipped into the icy water, chest tightening at the shock, and waded through knee-deep sludge, pushing aside reeds, keeping his weapon raised above his head. Halfway across, a faint sound reached him: engine noise. Aiden's heart hammered. He dropped to one knee, sinking deeper into the water, eyes scanning the ridge above. An enemy armored jeep rumbled along the dirt trail, moving fast, tires kicking up gravel. Aiden ducked lower, breathing through clenched teeth. The vehicle passed without slowing. He counted 20 seconds before moving again, faster now, pulling himself up the far embankment. Boots hit mud. He rolled into a low bush, heart pounding, but no alarms, no shouts. The line was crossed. Behind enemy lines now. He paused, catching his breath, consulting the folded map. His compass needle trembled slightly from magnetic interference, but the direction was clear northeast toward the Dentrek Highlands, through 30 kilometers of dense forest, then another 20 of rolling plains where the prison camp was last located. The first few kilometers were deceptive. The forest canopy concealed him well, and animal trails cut through the undergrowth, making the path easier. But with every step, the land changed, clearing after clearing bore scars of war. Burnt-out vehicles, collapsed bunkers, old fortifications, now abandoned or crawling with enemy lookouts. Aiden's sharp eyes caught the signs. Cigarette butts no older than a day, broken branches from recent foot traffic, muddy boot prints facing northwest toward the main enemy outposts. He adjusted his course again, using these signs like breadcrumbs, avoiding likely patrol corridors. By early afternoon, he covered 17 kilometers ahead of schedule. His muscles burned, but his breathing stayed steady. The years of training, of discipline, of missions in worse places than this kept him sharp. But just when comfort tried to creep in, the forest spat out its first surprise. Voices. Aiden hit the ground instantly, belly flat against wet moss. Through the thick undergrowth, he spotted 3 figures moving along a path ahead enemy scouts. Their uniforms were patchwork, a mixture of regular army and local militia. AK-47s slung across broad shoulders, sidearms at their hips. They laughed, kicking at a fallen log. Worse dogs. Aiden's gut clenched as he spotted the lean gray hound trailing them, nose close to the ground. No way around. The terrain boxed him between a rocky incline and a gully. Retreating would cost him hours. Aiden's mind raced. Direct engagement risked alerts. Waiting risked discovery. He inched backward, silent, slow, watching the hound's head lift slightly, ears perking. Then a distraction. A nearby flock of birds exploded from a tree deeper in the woods. The dog's attention snapped toward the noise, tail stiff, posture alert. One soldier cursed in the local dialect and grabbed the leash, yanking it forward. The group moved on, heading south. Aiden exhaled soundlessly, counting 10 slow seconds before moving again, threading through the thickest part of the woods, keeping the wind at his face to scatter his scent. By sunset, Aiden had reached the halfway point, a narrow ravine carved by a tributary, concealed by overgrowth. Here, the prearranged supply drop would be made if the weather and enemy radars hadn't interfered. He waited, flat on his stomach, watching the sky turn from pale gold to navy blue. No drones overhead, no movement in the tree line. Then a soft thud. Aiden's head snapped up. A dull gray crate parachuted softly 50 meters downstream, tangled in a small pine. He moved swiftly, cutting it down with his knife, checking the markings. Inside compressed MREs, an extra pair of dry socks, 2 smoke grenades, a fresh mag for his Glock, water purification tablets, and a sealed envelope. He slid it open. Tracking indicates possible prisoner movement towards Station 21 Logistics Depot east of Dentrek Ridge. Adjust heading +5 degrees east. High activity reported. Move with caution. So they were being moved. Time was tightening like a noose. Aiden chewed a protein bar, refilled his water bladder, and prepared for night travel. Ahead lay the Dentrek Highlands, enemy patrol bases and checkpoints. But now he had direction. He had a trail. And nothing, not scouts, not weather, not distance, was going to stop him. With a final look westward toward home, Aiden pressed deeper into the night, footsteps swallowed by the wilderness. 50 kilometers remained, and his brothers were waiting. Chapter 3. Shadows and Traps. Night fell like a hammer. Under the cover of darkness, Sergeant Aiden Burke became a shadow, indistinguishable from the rocks, the trees, and the shifting wind. The Dentrek Highlands rose before him, a jagged maze of ridges and gullies known for ambushes and hidden encampments. Aiden adjusted his path eastward, following the updated intel that the captured comrades had been moved toward the enemy's logistics depot. Every step now was a gamble. One mistake could trigger an alarm, and there would be no second chances. Aiden pressed forward, threading through narrow animal tracks, his M4 rifle ready, eyes scanning constantly. The moon played hide-and-seek behind thick clouds, giving him stretches of welcome darkness. Twice, he dropped to the ground at the distant growl of engines. Through his scope, he saw convoys moving along dirt roads, headlights cut, soldiers perched on truck beds gripping rifles. He knew this area was alive with enemy movement. He could feel it. Smell the cooking fires miles away, hear the distant chatter of foreign voices bouncing off the high cliffs. Around midnight, Aiden encountered his first trap. The terrain narrowed into a natural choke point between 2 hills. Thick brush gave the appearance of cover, but Aiden's sharp eyes spotted the telltale signs: faint wires threaded between rocks, bent branches marking disturbed earth. Tripwire. Aiden crouched, running a gloved hand lightly above the ground until he traced the length of the line to its deadly conclusion, an improvised explosive buried beneath loose soil. One careless step would have blown him sky high. He disabled it quickly, cutting the wire just enough to prevent triggering, but leaving it intact to avoid suspicion. He marked the location on his internal mental map. This wasn't random. The enemy expected intrusion. From here onward, the land itself would fight him. Aiden pushed through dense pines, navigating by compass, moving by muscle memory. His breathing was slow, heart steady. He lived for this kind of mission where instinct sharpened, senses heightened, and survival meant more than just skill. It meant focus. Around 200 hours, he reached a low plateau overlooking a fire break where the enemy had cleared vegetation for supply routes. Lying flat on his stomach, Aiden observed 2 soldiers manning a checkpoint with a mounted spotlight, rotating lazily over the nearby paths. Beyond them, to the north, a road disappeared into the valley, the direction where Delta Squad was reportedly transported. Getting past the checkpoint wasn't optional. Aiden worked his way south along the ridge until he found what he needed: a dry creek bed running beneath the fire break through a storm culvert. Small enough to crawl, but safe enough to avoid the spotlight. He slithered into the culvert, every inch a battle as mud caked his elbows and sharp rocks scraped against his ribs. The damp air smelled of rot and rusted metal, but it was safe, concealed. 20 claustrophobic meters later, he emerged on the far side of the checkpoint. Above him, the oblivious guards smoked and laughed. Aiden pressed on without looking back. Before dawn, the land shifted again, steeper ridges, jagged rocks, thorn thickets. His progress slowed. Every step risked twisted ankles, every handhold carried the danger of loose footing. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he rationed himself to a few energy bites, saving precious calories for harder days ahead. Then, something stopped him cold. Fresh drag marks in the dirt, wide grooves, heavy pressure flanked by boot prints. Prisoner transport. Aiden crouched low, fingers tracing the marks. They were recent, no more than 12 hours old. Sweat prickled his spine despite the chill. The path veered toward a rocky canyon, infamous for enemy strongholds. He followed the signs deeper into the highlands, wary of ambushes. He counted at least 4 different sets of boot prints, 2 heavy, likely guards, 2 lighter, possibly his captured comrades. Hope surged, but so did caution. Hours later, before the first break of morning, Aiden found proof. A strip of olive green fabric caught on a thorn branch, standard issue combat sleeve. Dawn's first light broke as Aiden crouched beneath an overhang, observing the narrow valley below. 2 flatbed trucks idled near a small fortified outpost, men moving lazily around steel drums and makeshift tents. This was no ordinary patrol base, it was a prisoner way station. Aiden's heart pounded as he focused his scope on the center of the camp. There they were. 2 soldiers, bound, hoods over their heads, seated near the central tent. 1 guard lazily paced around them. Delta Squad. Aiden's jaw tightened. He was within sight of his brothers, but between him and them stood layers of sentries, patrols, and hardened killers. He would need precision, patience, and the sharp edge of every skill he'd ever learned. Dirt streaked his face. Blood oozed from cuts on his knuckles. His muscles ached from hours of crawling, climbing, and moving in silence. But Aiden Burke didn't feel any of it. He felt only one thing: resolve. 35 kilometers done, 35 more to go. Tonight, the hunt would begin in earnest, and by the time the sun set again, someone in that valley would regret ever putting their hands on his brothers. Chapter 4. Tracks of Hope. Morning light leaked through the twisted canopy, but Aiden Burke remained still beneath his rocky outcrop, hidden from prying eyes. Below him, the enemy outpost stirred to life. Soldiers barking orders, trucks revving their engines, a campfire sending black smoke into the crisp air. Every movement was filed into Aiden's memory, the frequency of patrols, rotation of guards, the laziness of their routines. But his attention kept drifting back to the center of the camp. There by the main tent sat his brothers. Even from a distance, Aiden could make out the slumped shoulders, the hoods over their heads, the rough handling by the guards. A knot formed in his chest, but he forced it down. Emotion would get him killed. Precision would get them out. He spent 2 hours watching, unseen, waiting for weakness to appear. Then it came. A supply truck rumbled into the camp from the north trail, and every guard not on post converged on it, grabbing boxes, arguing over rations, their discipline crumbling. Aiden's jaw tightened. Typical. Even in hostile forces, hunger spoke louder than rank. The guards at the prisoner's post drifted closer to the truck, leaving their captives momentarily unwatched. Not the right time to strike, but a window of understanding opened. Aiden's escape route was confirmed. He retreated silently from his overlook, vanishing into thick pines, circling the camp's perimeter, always moving against the wind. His next goal: intercept the trail where the truck had come from. He needed to know if it was a temporary camp or a transit point. By midday, Aiden reached the northern trail, a crude dirt road carved between cliffs and ravines. Fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the path. More importantly, Aiden discovered a discarded ration wrapper with a date stamp. These convoys were recent, consistent, moving supplies and prisoners eastward. Pulling out his map, Aiden's eyes narrowed on a key marker. Station 21, a logistics depot and field prison 40 clicks east, surrounded by minefields and watchtowers. Every instinct screamed that his brothers were being moved there. Time was running out. His decision was made. If the convoy left by dusk, he'd have to track it close enough to monitor, distant enough to avoid detection. Aiden checked his gear, adjusted his supplies, secured his knife tighter on his thigh. He stripped his rations to bare minimum: water purification tablets, protein bars, and high-calorie gels. Mobility was his only ally. He moved eastward before sunset, parallel to the trail, using the ridgeline as cover. His pace was brutal, driven by urgency. Sweat ran down his spine despite the cool air. Every few kilometers he paused, checking for signs of movement, checking the rhythm of the convoy's advance. At nightfall, the convoy moved 4 vehicles, including a flatbed carrying 2 huddled figures, bound and blindfolded. His brothers. Aiden clenched his fists, heart hammering. He followed them like a ghost, always on higher ground, silent and swift. Through narrow passes, through cut-down forests, through the remains of bombed-out villages, he shadowed them. Once, he almost stumbled into an outlier scout group, but melted behind rocks, letting them pass so close he could hear them laughing. Twice, he spotted tripwires across narrow game trails, designed to catch would-be saboteurs. He marked them, avoiding the traps with the grace of a predator. 48 kilometers into his journey, the terrain opened into a large basin where lights from Station 21 blinked in the distance. Watchtowers pierced the skyline, barbed wire fences glinted in the moonlight, and massive steel gates groaned as the convoy entered. Aiden crouched beneath a craggy ridge, panting softly, muscles burning, legs trembling from exhaustion. But inside him burned something greater. His brothers were there, and no prison gate would stop him. There was no turning back now. 70 kilometers or death. He'd come this far alone, through shadows, through traps, through the jaws of enemy territory, and now the true fight began. Chapter 5. Night of Silent Death. Darkness descended like a curtain over Station 21, and with it, Aiden Burke became something more than a man. He became a shadow. Where others saw barbed wire, floodlights, and concrete watchtowers, Aiden saw cracks, vulnerabilities, and timing. He crouched in the hollow of a rocky outcrop less than 400 meters from the compound, studying every movement, every routine. The guards moved like clockwork, rotating shifts every 2 hours. The floodlights on the southern perimeter stuttered every few minutes, faulty wiring probably neglected by underpaid mechanics. The storage yard behind the main building was shielded from the front towers by the curve of the terrain. And most importantly, a small drainage culvert exited through the back fence, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Aiden's watch read 223:17 hours. He had less than 7 hours before sunrise. He couldn't afford to wait. The approach was brutal, belly crawling across sharp rocks and prickly thorns, inching forward at a snail's pace. His M4 was wrapped in fabric to prevent metallic glint, and he'd stripped his kit to bare essentials: knife, suppressed sidearm, multi-tool, and a coil of paracord. At Aero 051, he reached the outer perimeter. The drainage culvert was small, but just enough for him to squeeze through. He unscrewed the mesh grate with practiced speed, muscles tensing with every metallic squeak, praying no one was close enough to hear. Inside, the air reeked of stagnant water and decay, but Aiden pressed forward, crawling through knee-deep sludge. Rats scurried in the dark. Every movement was controlled, his breathing slowed to nothing more than whispers in the silence. Inside the compound walls, Aiden emerged from the culvert, pressed himself flat against the cold concrete of a storage building. Voices echoed from across the yard, 2 guards laughing, boots crunching gravel. He waited. 1 minute, then another. Then movement. 1 guard drifted around the corner, alone. Aiden moved like a striking viper. 2 silent steps, a sharp arm around the throat, knife sliding clean under the jawline, a choked gurgle, then silence. Aiden caught the body, lowering it softly into the grass. His next objective, the central holding cell. He slithered between stacks of crates, ducked beneath broken sections of fence, evaded spotlights by moving in sync with their rotations. His world was reduced to short dashes between shadows, every step bringing him closer. At 0137, he reached the detention block's outer wall. 1 sentry by the door. Aiden closed in from behind, pistol raised, suppressor hissing as he fired 1 precise shot, clean headshot, no sound louder than a muffled cough. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit. The guards, thinking themselves safe behind reinforced walls, had grown careless. Aiden moved like a ghost, silent, unseen. Third cell from the left, he found them. Sergeant Noah Hunt and Corporal Eric Dane, bound, bruised but breathing. Recognition sparked in their swollen faces when they saw Aiden. His blade cut ropes in seconds. "You're real," Noah whispered, voice cracking. "Yeah," Aiden whispered back. "And we're leaving." Aiden passed each man a pistol from fallen guards and retrieved a small map from the operations room before exfiltration. Every shortcut mattered now. Every moment shaved off their escape meant fewer patrols on their tail. Before slipping through the culvert again, Aiden planted 2 small charges near the fuel depot, parting gifts to cripple Station 21's supplies. At Zoo 245, 3 shadows melted back into the wilderness. Behind them, a sudden roar filled the night as explosions ripped through the depot, flames licking the sky, sirens wailing. Aiden's voice was low but steady. 35 kilometers to safe ground. Stay with me. They moved fast despite injuries, Aiden leading, brothers following. No rest, no slowing. Every breath counted. Every step carried them farther from the jaws of death. And with every kilometer gained, hope burned stronger. Aiden had come 70 kilometers through hostile land to save his brothers, and he wasn't stopping now. Chapter 6. The Fortress of Chains. The night was ablaze behind them, orange flames flickering like angry tongues across the distant skyline. The fuel depot burned ferociously, the thunder of explosions echoing into the valleys. But Sergeant Aiden Burke didn't glance back, not once. Ahead was the only direction that mattered now. 35 kilometers stood between them and friendly lines. 35 kilometers of hostile ground where the enemy would soon be on high alert, every patrol sweeping the valleys, every roadblock tightened, every sensor wide awake. Aiden led from the front, Noah limping just behind, Eric grimacing with every step, ribs likely broken from the interrogations. They had little food, almost no medical supplies, and no backup, but they were free. And for Aiden Burke, freedom meant one thing: movement. By 400 hours, they had pushed 5 kilometers through thick brush, avoiding the main trails. The towering cliffs of the highlands gave way to winding ridges and narrow riverbeds. Aiden moved with practiced precision, always reading the land, anticipating choke points before they stumbled into them. At dawn, they reached a small ridge with vantage over the basin below and saw it. Station 21 was surrounded by enemy convoys, trucks roaring in, searchlights stabbing through the trees, dozens of soldiers pouring out in frantic chaos. The base was in lockdown, but the fires still raged. Their escape had been discovered. "Sir, we'll never make it if they start pushing north," Noah muttered, wiping blood from his brow. Aiden crouched, calculating quickly. "We're not heading north yet," he said. "We cut east first, through the canyon pass. It'll add distance, but by time they won't expect us to loop." Noah and Eric didn't argue. They followed. By mid-morning, they were navigating through a narrow canyon. The high rock faces muffled sound and cloaked them in shadow, but danger remained. They spotted fresh tire tracks, recent cigarette butts, even a string of razor-wire booby traps rigged across a narrow pass. Aiden's knife worked quickly, disarming traps, pointing out loose footing, guiding them like a shepherd through a land of predators. Fatigue bore down on them like lead weights, but he kept their pace relentless. Every 10 minutes they gained before the pursuit forces mobilized was a victory. At noon, they paused beneath a ledge. Aiden dug into his last protein bar, broke it into 3, and shared it without hesitation. Water came from a filthy runoff, purified with tablets. Their breaths were ragged, their bodies battered, but their will unbroken. "Status?" Aiden asked. "Ribs cracked," Eric muttered, "but legs holding." "Same," Noah rasped. "Vision's blurry, but I can walk." Aiden's lips thinned. "Then we walk." Afternoon heat made the march brutal, the sun beating down on the rocky paths. The only comfort came from knowing that their loop east had likely bought them crucial time. By dusk, Aiden guided them toward an abandoned supply station, little more than crumbling sheds and an old communications tower. He sent Eric and Noah to rest under cover while he scouted. Inside a rusted-out building, Aiden discovered a forgotten stash, a half-used medical kit, one unopened energy bar, and most valuable, a dusty field radio. It had no antenna, battery nearly dead, but Aiden's heart quickened. It was a chance. He worked through the night, stripping wires, fixing connections with the precision of a man who knew time was blood. By 2200 hours, he powered it on, bypassed the encryption, and broadcasted a narrowband distress signal toward friendly territory. Echo Command, this is Iron Wolf. Copy if you hear me. Package secured, 3 men exfiltrating enemy territory, requesting emergency extraction. Coordinates tracking southeastern basin, 28 clicks from friendly lines. Hostiles in pursuit. We are moving. Iron Wolf out. The radio crackled, then silence. Aiden didn't wait for confirmation. He woke the others. Move, now. Ahead lay endless miles of exposed ridgeways, crumbling bridges, and enemy ambush points. But they also had something the enemy didn't. Desperation sharpened into survival instinct, and a bond no chain could break. They weren't just escapees. They were soldiers on the run, unwilling to die in chains, determined to carve a path through the storm. 70 kilometers in, and Aiden Burke's mission was only halfway done. Chapter 7. The Great Breach. Midnight came like a blade, sharp, cold, and deadly. Beneath the fractured moonlight, Aiden Burke pressed forward, his legs aching from exhaustion, every tendon stretched to its limit. Behind him, Noah and Eric moved in silence, shoulders hunched but pace steady. The canyon walls narrowed, forcing them through tight ravines where every sound seemed to bounce back 1,000 times louder. They were no longer evading casual patrols. They were being hunted. At 0:30 hours, distant howls echoed through the night, military dogs, fast and relentless. Aiden clenched his fists, immediately adjusting their course uphill toward the jagged ridge. Down below, the enemy would fan out in lines, sweeping low ground with hounds and flashlights. Up here, the wind would scatter their scent, and the rocks would shield them. But it also meant harder travel, steeper climbs, narrow ledges, risking falls where a single misstep could mean broken bones. Eric slipped once, catching himself on a sharp rock, hissing in pain. His right hand bled, but he only nodded when Aiden checked him. "We keep moving," Eric said, grim determination in his eyes. "I didn't come this far to get dragged back." By 02:30, they reached the ridgeline, collapsing momentarily under the cover of dense pines. Down below, flashlights danced in a frantic pattern, voices shouting in their native tongue, dogs barking wildly. "They know we're here," Noah muttered, "but they don't know where." Aiden's jaw set, "And we keep it that way." He pulled out the tattered map, tracing their next move. 20 kilometers to the pre-established emergency extraction point. Between them stood the Dentrek Basin, a natural valley funneled by cliffs, known for its dangerous wildlife and its history as a smuggling route. In normal conditions, it was a forbidden zone even for locals, but tonight it was their only chance. At 3:30, they descended the eastern slope. Every descent strained their battered bodies, knees screaming, ribs grinding, lungs gasping. They swallowed the last of their energy gels, forcing their muscles to obey. Below, the basin stretched like a sleeping monster, gullies choked with deadwood, patches of swamp, and sheer rock faces. There was no trail, no road, just instinct and direction. And all around them, the hunt continued. By sunrise, their boots were soaked, legs coated in mud. The dogs were behind them, but not by far. They moved in strict silence, conserving breath, watching every angle. The basin's natural hazards slowed their pursuers but demanded everything from the trio. Aiden led through the worst of it, hacking branches, checking unstable ground, guiding them through marsh that threatened to swallow them whole. At one point, a half-collapsed rope bridge stood in their way, rotted planks dangling over a 40-foot drop. "I'll test it," Aiden said. Noah grabbed his shoulder. "Sir, if that gives out, then you finish the job," Aiden cut him off sharply. He crossed first, each step deliberate. The ropes creaked like dying animals. The planks shuddered beneath his boots, but it held. Barely. One by one they crossed, hearts hammering until they touched solid earth again. At 0900 hours, gunfire cracked behind them, enemy skirmishers, having discovered their tracks, closing in. Aiden didn't hesitate. He led them into the thickest part of the woods, doubled back along the canyon, and then rigged a quick trap using scavenged wire and a smoke grenade. Minutes later, a deafening explosion rang out, followed by angry shouts. At least one squad was delayed, maybe worse. At 1100 hours, they reached the final rise, a steep bluff overlooking the southern edge of the basin. Beyond it lay the broken remains of an old village, and 10 kilometers beyond that, the edge of contested territory. But from the ridge, Aiden saw the worst. A fortified enemy checkpoint now stood across the narrow pass leading to the safe zone. Hummers, guards, and 2 mounted machine guns. Noah wiped sweat from his eyes. How the hell do we punch through that? Aiden's stare hardened. We don't. We break it. He pointed to the abandoned village, a maze of old stone huts and collapsed walls. We turn the village into chaos, draw them in, make them think we went north, and we run the south ridge while they're chasing ghosts. Chapter 8, Last Stand in the Pines. The sun bore down hard now, baking the rocks and drying the sweat that streamed down Aiden's back. Every nerve in his body screamed for rest, but the last 10 kilometers were the most dangerous. Eric and Noah limped beside him, driven only by the raw instinct to survive. Behind them, distant gunfire still echoed through the canyon, but it was fading. They had broken the line, but the enemy would regroup. Time was no longer measured in hours, but in breaths. At 1400 hours, the terrain changed again. The open cliffs gave way to thick pine groves. Tall, skeletal trees stood like ancient sentinels, offering both cover and a fresh challenge. Visibility dropped, and the underbrush was riddled with old trenches and foxholes from forgotten battles. Aiden knew the border to friendly lines lay just beyond the far tree line, where a narrow valley funneled toward the Echo River. Crossing that river meant salvation. But the enemy wasn't done yet. At 1445 hours, Aiden heard it rotor blades. He ducked instinctively, pulling Eric and Noah into a gully. A rusty Mi-8 helicopter circled the area, searching low, its side doors open with gunners scanning the woods. Aiden's jaw tensed. No way they could outrun an air search. They needed concealment, and they needed to disrupt the search pattern. He quickly pointed to a series of narrow trenches zigzagging downhill. "Get into the old trench lines," he ordered. "We cut southwest under tree cover and move only when the chopper loops away." It became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Move 15 meters. Freeze. Wait for the helicopter to pass. Move again. Sometimes they crawled, other times they sprinted low. Aiden watched the enemy's search patterns and slipped between them like liquid shadow. By 1600, they reached the western ridgeline. In the distance, the silver glint of Echo River appeared, its narrow waters slicing through the wilderness. Freedom was close, too close to risk mistakes. But their luck thinned. Noah collapsed to his knees, breath ragged. His leg, already torn from beatings, was swelling, the bruises turning black. Eric's arm trembled from blood loss, his injured ribs forcing every breath into a painful gasp. Aiden crouched beside them, his own body threatening to give up after nearly 70 kilometers of hell. He forced his voice steady. "You don't die here," he told them. "Not when we're this close." Eric chuckled grimly, eyes glassy. "Not planning to, boss." Aiden stripped the last painkillers from his kit, jammed adrenaline shots into both men's thighs, tightened Noah's knee with a makeshift brace, and adjusted their gear to be even lighter. Then, he grabbed a smoke grenade as last and pulled the pin. With a billow of smoke drifting east, Aiden led them west, cutting through the thickest part of the woods, slipping past the last search groups who followed the false signal. At 1700, they broke out onto the riverbank. The Echo River, though narrow, flowed swiftly, its far side shielded by a low ridge, and beyond that, the first friendly listening post. 200 meters, Aiden whispered. Without hesitation, they waded in. The cold bit deep, the current pulling at their weakened limbs. Aiden led them across, positioning himself downstream to block the worst of the current from the others. Behind them, scattered gunfire erupted. Enemy scouts had reached the clearing. Shouts carried over the water. Bullets cracked across the surface. Aiden spun, shouldering his M4, sending precise bursts to suppress them. Noah fired too, wincing with each shot, while Eric staggered through the last stretch. They crawled onto the far bank, lungs heaving, muscles quaking. Then radio static crackled. Aiden yanked out the emergency beacon, which blinked green now. A crackling voice came through, distorted but clear enough. "Iron Wolf, we read you. Package located. QRF inbound. Hold your position." Aiden allowed himself a rare smile. At 1735 hours, less than 5 minutes after crossing, the first friendly patrol emerged from the ridgeline, faces painted in green, rifles raised, moving fast and deadly. Noah collapsed into the dirt, eyes wide. "We made it." Aiden just nodded, finally allowing his body to sag in exhaustion. His job was done. 70 kilometers, behind enemy lines, on foot, and against every odd they had survived. Chapter 9. Extraction. The familiar crackle of radio chatter was the most beautiful sound Aiden Burke had heard in days. Exhausted, soaked, and wounded, he crouched beside his brothers under the cover of pines as friendly operators fanned out around them, securing the riverbank perimeter. The quick reaction force had arrived. "Sergeant Burke," a figure approached, face painted in camo, rifle steady. Aiden pushed himself upright, muscles protesting. "Burke, Delta Squad, +2 recovered. Hostile presence 500 meters northeast. Air assets overhead?" The lead operator nodded. "Choppers inbound. Fast extract. You boys look like hell." "We earned it," Aiden muttered, glancing at Noah and Eric. Both were slumped against a rock, breathing but alive victory in its rawest form. Minutes later, 2 low-flying helicopters skimmed across the treetops. One Black Hawk, callsign Raptor 1, and a secondary Little Bird gunship providing overwatch. As the rotors thundered overhead, the team wasted no time. "Priority medevac for these 2, Aiden said, motioning to his teammates. "I'll assist loading." Noah tried to protest, but Aiden cut him off. "You got them this far. Let us carry you home." Within 60 seconds, Noah and Eric were strapped inside the Black Hawk, medics already working on IV lines and stabilizers. Aiden boarded last, grabbing a headset from a crew chief. "Raptor 1, go," the pilot called, and they lifted off. The riverbank shrinking below, the fading silhouettes of angry enemy search parties gathering far too late. In the relative quiet of the chopper, Aiden finally allowed his hands to shake, adrenaline crashing down like a wave. Dirt streaked his face, his body bruised, his uniform torn in a dozen places, but his heart stayed calm. Mission accomplished. The pilot turned back. "That's one hell of a run, Sergeant. Full debrief in 24, but the brass already knows. You're a damn ghost out there." Aiden didn't answer immediately. He just glanced at his brothers alive, breathing, out of enemy hands. Then, with a tired smile, he spoke into the headset. "We don't leave our own behind. Ever." Behind them, the hostile land still burned, the trails they carved already being swallowed back into the wilderness. But their path would be remembered, etched in the memory of every soldier who knew the meaning of brotherhood. Aiden Burke didn't just make it back. He brought his family with him. And in the world of warriors, that was the only victory that mattered. Chapter 10. Homecoming. The hum of military machinery was replaced by a quieter, more human sound. The murmur of voices, the steady rhythm of footsteps, the distant thrum of helicopters heading back out to the front lines. But inside the secure base hospital, there was calm. Aiden Burke sat upright on his bunk, his ribs wrapped, stitches lining his forearm, a fresh scar already forming near his left temple. It had been 5 days since the extraction. Outside, the war raged on. Patrols deployed, missions launched, maps constantly redrawn by politicians. But in this room, in this moment, there was something precious: survival, reunion, and the unshakable bond of brotherhood. The door creaked open. Sergeant Noah Hunt walked in, his limp more controlled, bruises fading but spirit burning strong. Eric Dane followed, ribs still taped, but his posture straighter than it had been in weeks. "You boys still breathing?" Aiden asked, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Breathing, eating, cursing your name for dragging us out of hell," Noah grinned. Eric clapped Aiden on the shoulder. "Words out, whole units talking. You went 70 kilometers solo behind enemy lines. Command's calling it Burke's Run. You're a bloody legend now." Aiden shook his head. "I didn't do it for the stories." "We know," Eric said simply. "You did it because we're family." Later that day, the company commander visited. He awarded Aiden the Distinguished Service Cross, pinned fresh stripes on Noah and Eric for valor under captivity, and finished with a rare handshake and a quiet, heartfelt welcome home. But the greatest reward wasn't a medal or ceremony. It was that all 3 of them were alive, standing, walking, breathing free air again. That night, Aiden sat alone beneath the stars on the barracks rooftop, a quiet breeze tugging at his fatigues. Memories of the 70-kilometer trek flickered through his mind: silent nights, deadly traps, desperate runs through darkness. He'd faced death a dozen times, but he'd never felt stronger. In the end, the war would carry on. More battles, more missions, more impossible orders. But some victories carved themselves deeper than others. For Aiden Burke, the greatest triumph wasn't survival, it was bringing his brothers home. And whenever the world asked about the 70-kilometer trek, he would always answer with a quiet, unwavering truth: no man gets left behind.